But we'll get back into that coming up, because another important offseason that we're going to spend a lot of time on is the Cincinnati Bengals. I mean, look, the crossover between the Reds and the Bengals, very, very similar. They have their marquee franchise player. Well, I shouldn't say franchise player for LA, because we don't know how long he'll be here, but we do know how much longer he'll be here, at least from that regards. But you have this star player that the city has gravitated towards, and the success is predicated around them, and how the front office goes about building the roster around them. We felt good about the Bengals' approach a few years ago. It's taken a step back over the last couple, and now we approach this offseason, and we keep saying it. Jacob laughs at it all the time when we say this is the most important offseason ever for the Bengals, but I understand why people are saying that, because it's one thing if they would have made the playoffs and got upset in the divisional round, or if they would have made it to the AFC Championship game and got knocked out. All of the concerns about the roster, all about the decisions that they would have to make. The Trey Hendrickson decision, whether the Bengals made it to the AFC title game or missed the playoffs this past year, we would still be talking about what should they do with Trey Hendrickson's contract. We would still be talking about what should they do with T. Higgins' contract. We'd still be questioning why Jamar Chase wasn't taken care of last year. That became the distraction in camp. So the questions that we have about this team would exist regardless of what happened last season. But because they did miss the playoffs, it has put a magnifying glass on every decision that this front office is going to make moving forward, because it's not just about taking care of the star players they have. It's about the pieces that they have to put around those star players to make sure what happened this past season and the year before doesn't happen again moving forward. And if we can weigh in on it, we can hear national prognosticators weigh in on it, we can hear national media, local media, everyone could weigh in on it. But when Joe Burrow speaks, that's when everyone goes silent. Everyone listens. Obviously, Joe Burrow's been, in the headlines a lot right now with all the Pro Bowl games and everything else kind of going on. Take a listen. Joe Burrow kind of weighed in, kind of scratching his head the way everyone else is. What more does Jamar Chase have to do? Take a listen.
Yeah, everybody sees it every single week in and week out. He continues to make unbelievable plays, make people miss, score 50-plus yards, touchdowns. I mean, I don't know what more he could do to show and prove himself. We have several guys like that who have stepped up for us and deserve to be paid what they're worth.
Deserve to be paid what they're worth. When he said, what more does Jamar Chase have to do? To be fair, I'm not defending the Bengals here, but I don't think it's about Jamar Chase. There's nothing more he can do. In fact, it's all the stuff that he's done that's created this problem for the Bengals, because if Jamar Chase was just one of the top wide receivers in football, they can get a big deal contract put together, and it would still probably be a pain because of the way that they operate with guarantees and all this stuff. But it's because he's the best wide receiver in football that has kind of created this extra layer to the complicity of how they're going to put this contract together. So I don't think there's, Jamar Chase, there's nothing more he can do. It's not about proving it to the front office. It's about the front office proving to him and Joe Burrow and this team that they're going to do what's right by the players, especially elite star players that dominate the way that he has. Like I said, I just don't think that Jamar Chase has to prove anything more. It's the Bengals that need to prove that they can get this deal done, not the other way around.
For sure. And I think the most interesting part of that is he's asked about Jamar Chase and what he can do to improve or his contract this offseason. And the first thing he does is throw Trey Hendrickson in there too. We have multiple guys that play at the top of their position and deserve to be compensated. So I'm convinced, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson opt out of the Pro Bowl. Russell Wilson, Drake may go. I'm convinced Joe Burrow just went because he knew he was going to get TV time to put pressure on Mike Brown. I mean, that's the only reason he's doing all this stuff this offseason. He's going to put as much pressure on the front office and ownership and as he possibly can to get this stuff done, because he knows financially it is possible. And if they don't do it, it's because they are cheap and don't have cash.
Yeah, I think that we talk a lot about leverage, and usually the front office, the ownership, the team has the leverage over players. This is the moment where the players take control because they know what they're doing. Joe Burrow knows what he's doing when he's going on television and he's talking about contracts and how much Jamar Chase is worth. CeeDee Lamb got paid 4 years, $136 million, with a $38 million signing bonus. So much money that's guaranteed, and the Bengals are probably shaking in their boots that they're going to have to pony up and give that. But they absolutely have to, because there's no other option. There's no other option to keep not only the fans happy, but Joe Burrow in the locker room happy. Joe Burrow is probably the third most valuable asset in sports in this country, maybe. Fourth most, fifth most. He's a top 5 most valuable asset in the country. You can't upset him because it's such a bad look on your organization, such a bad look on your franchise, and he'd leave. So They know what they're doing. Jamar Chase is going to become the highest paid wide receiver in the NFL. I think T. Higgins is going to be here as well, and he's going to get paid probably. He's going to be a top 10 wide receiver in payment in the NFL. And then you look at Trey Hendrickson, and you say, all right, this guy leads the league in sacks. The defense is bad. We got to pay the one good defensive player. And I know there's a couple more, but you got to pay the one really good defensive player that you have. The players know this, and they know that the front office knows it. So they're going to use as much leverage as they can. They're going to keep going on interviews. Probably they'll go on podcasts this offseason, and they'll talk about how much they're worth and how much they want to be in Cincinnati, and they would love to stay here for as long as possible. And hopefully that the Brown family will pony up and pay them. It's a leverage game. Sports is a business. That's the most important thing to remember here. It's a business, and right now the Bengals, to keep their business strong, have to pay the guys that bring all the eyeballs onto their team.
And I think a lot of people, the thing that makes this conversation really easy for me in terms of extending T. Higgins or Trey Hendrickson, I see a lot of people talking about, percentage of the cap on offense with, Joe and Jamar and T all being paid as much as they are, and you don't want to have that much money in the wide receivers. Who else are you paying? Who else on this team right now do you see that you're like, oh, that guy's an extension candidate at big-time money? That guy is going to be a part of this future for sure. I don't see him. I really don't see him
Jake,
at all.
I don't think it's about extension, though. I don't think anyone's advocating, oh, don't give T. Higgins the money because you need to extend this guy. I think the mindset from some in the chat, or just that you're responding to, I think it's, well, don't give that money to him. Who do you give it to? Well, I think it goes to people who are on this roster. People want guys to come in, free agents, bigger names to come in and help bolster this roster. I don't think it's the debate of don't extend T, extend this guy. It's don't extend T so that you can use that money to go add talent on this side. I think that's where the premise is coming from.
The debate through this era for the Bengals has been don't extend this guy to extend this guy. And that's why we got to this point, was not extending Jesse Bates to extend T. Higgins, and letting Joe Mixon walk to get cheaper in the running back room to extend the young offensive core. So I think they've operated this whole time in terms of don't extend this guy to extend this guy. And when you run out of a list of players on the roster that are worthy of an extension, I think it makes your life easier. If you can't hit in the draft, how do you let the very few people you've hit on walk out the door? I think that's the biggest piece, is will you just go sign free agents at all 22 positions? I don't think if you continue to draft well and have someone play well, at some point you have to reward them for that. Otherwise, why come to Cincinnati if you're going to come play, exactly how we hope you're going to play, and then we let you walk? I don't think that's a very good precedent to set, and we've already said it a couple times.
I also hate to keep saying it, but they've signed free agents the past 2 years, and most of them have been failures. Geno Stone, failure. Nick Scott, failure. Sheldon Rankins, failure. You go down the line, and it just we can say that we're going to save money for all these defensive guys that we're going to bring in, and they're going to be great. But what if they're not great? I know T. Higgins is great. We already have him here. I know Trey Hendrickson's great. We've got him here. I know what they're capable of. I've seen it. They've been on the team for a while now, and they've played at an incredibly high level. My concern, and it's always been my concern, that if you let T. Higgins walk, we're now messing with an offense that is the sole reason why they are in football games. The only reason. Sure, I would love to improve the defense too. I would love to, and I think they're going to improve the defense. That's why you go out and get a new defensive coordinator who's going to develop talent out of the draft, something that we've been unable to do. But if you mess with the offense, and then you have the defense who also stinks, and we're bringing in a lot of mystery players over there, then what is this team? What's the identity of the team? You can't take away the 2 wide receivers from Joe Burrow. I firmly believe that. And if you don't pay T. Higgins, I think Jacob said it yesterday, a guy like Calvin Ridley, there are replacements that I could get in on. But again, you're betting on those guys to do what T. Higgins has done. And I don't know if they can do that.
And I guess this is kind of, putting people on the spot, because I don't expect on the end of January for you to have a good beat on NFL free agency, but who do you want us to go sign? The biggest name free agent available is Khalil Mack. You want, 30-year-old Hassan Reddick. I don't see a bunch of marquee free agents on the defensive side of the ball right now that are sitting out there for the Bengals to go spend $30 million on if they were going to do that, which I don't think they would.
What is wrong? And again, I'm not advocating for Hassan Reddick, but again, if the Bengals did get Hassan Reddick, what would be the problem with that?
I certainly wouldn't
let's
want a
say
30-plus-year-old edge rusher. That's why I'm already a little bit hesitant on extending Trey Hendrickson long term. If you're going to rebuild an entire defense, I wouldn't put a lot of money in a multi-year contract in a 30-plus-year-old. The only reason Trey is kind of removed from that conversation for me is because he's been here and he's a leader in the locker room on that side of the football.
It just sounds like, and again, I'm not arguing today. I'm too tired to argue. It just sounds like every possible scenario to improve this team, you guys have pushback on. Well, you can rely on the draft. Well, they don't draft well. Well, you can rely on free agents. Well, look at their hit rate in free agents lately. Well, they just give the money to T. Higgins then. Well, we saw the team miss the playoffs with Jamar, Joe, and T playing at an elite level. Like, I think the conversation needs to be, it's like it has to be, well, they have to hit in free agency. And I know that's very easy to say, but it's like the pressure's on. Like, I know what you guys are saying based on the doubt you have for them to better this roster, but like, it sounds like there's no avenue to improve this roster based on every pushback that you guys give, because you don't trust this organization to draft and develop. You don't trust this organization and their analysis on player personnel and free agency. So you're just saying just throw the money to T and just hope that those players develop. I think that's the pushback that some are having with your guys' take on that, only because
and that's fair.
At some point you got to better the roster with money and not just hope that they develop.
I think the other point of it, though, and it's something I've talked about before, is the $30 million isn't going to another $30 million player. So I don't necessarily think paying T. Higgins – yeah, right. I don't think paying T. Higgins drastically changes how much the Bengals are going to spend on defense this offseason. And that sounds crazy because it's $30 million to a wide receiver and it cuts into the cap, and I understand that. They're going to make 2 or 3 mid-level free agency signings on defense, whether they extend T. Higgins or not. And I pretty firmly believe that. I think they're also going to sign a guard, and if T. Higgins walks, they're also going to sign a wide receiver. I think that's where the money's going. The money's going to another wide receiver, and maybe it's not the whole $30 million, but it's 15, 18, 20. So I don't know if a $10 million, $15 million difference in what you're getting at a T. Higgins versus someone on the open market at wide receiver 2 is worth it if the Bengals aren't going to go put that into someone else. If we're talking about trading for a real difference maker, like we brought up very briefly at the trade deadline, a Jeffrey Simmons, a Max Crosby, a Myles Garrett, if he somehow sneaks his way back out on the market, even though Andrew Berry said he's not going to, I would be more in on something like that because I think that kind of player could change the team. I just don't think the Bengals would ever make a swing like that. And I think that's why I'm so locked in on extending T. Higgins, is because he's the only blue chip player the Bengals can add to their roster this year. And it's not even an ad. It's the easiest thing you could ever do. It's extending a guy that wants to be here.
It's also their job.
Where will the team get better then? Where will the team get better if they give, and not arguing, I guess I'm just throwing out these scenarios of, okay, they pay T, where do they get better?
Yeah, so you obviously hope the pieces on defense get better. That's why you fire Lou Anarumo. He's not been getting them up to speed with what you want. But the other argument with that is if you let T. Higgins walk, doesn't the offense get inherently worse, so therefore the offense is getting better?
No, I don't think it's just exclusively that. I think, and again,
but that's what I'm saying. Like, T. Higgins is an addition. Like, that is an addition. The offense is getting better with T. Higgins as your wide receiver 2 versus whoever else you'd have this offseason.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I'm not saying they're better without T, but better if T's gone, the offense takes a step back. But if the offense takes a step back while the defense takes a step forward, you meet in that middle ground. Look, I don't want to talk in circles. That's not my goal. I apologize. Fair. I'm just saying, like,
I don't necessarily think it's as mutually exclusive as you do, I think is what we're getting at. I think that's the split in the Bengals fan base as well. Some people believe you can extend T. Higgins and do what's necessary to fix this defense and this offensive line. That's where I fall. I think that's where we're getting up above 50% now, maybe on the signed T. Higgins train. I think it's definitely getting up there a little higher. But the people that are saying that the money's going to sink this team if you extend T. Higgins, I understand their argument too. My thing is just I don't know how you can draft Pro Bowlers and continue to let them walk out of the building.